In a small, quiet studio, paintbrushes are neatly arranged, paints lined up like a perfect spectrum, every object placed with intentional precision. Yet behind this serene order lies a constant mental noise, an inner voice that rarely rests. It questions, doubts, and repeats. This is the world of some artists living with OCD, Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder. It is a world filled with immense creativity, but also with relentless pressure and anxiety. For many of us, art is synonymous with freedom of thought, movement, and soul. But for artists with OCD, this freedom is often accompanied by invisible chains. Their minds, so uniquely wired for detail and depth, also subject them to overwhelming scrutiny. In this video, we'll take a deep dive into how OCD shapes, directs, and sometimes obstructs the working style of artists. This is a story of art, struggle, and unseen bravery that lies quietly behind the canvas, a story that rarely gets told, but deserves to be heard. A mind that never rests. Artists with OCD often face a tidal wave of intrusive and repetitive thoughts that can hijack their creative process. These thoughts, unwanted, distressing, and often irrational, come uninvited and linger like stubborn echoes in the mind. What should be an act of freedom becomes a field of mental landmines. Each brushstroke, each chord, or line of poetry is shadowed by nagging doubts. Is this good enough? Should I do it again? Is it perfect? These aren't casual reflections, they're obsessive demands that resist dismissal. As a result, the artistic flow can come to a grinding halt, replaced by exhausting cycles of correction and second-guessing. An artist might spend hours adjusting a tiny corner of a painting, not due to lack of skill, but because their mind refuses to accept that it is finished. And yet, that elusive feeling of just right is often an illusion, one that forever dances just out of reach. This means an artist could be physically creating, but emotionally stuck, trapped in a limbo where nothing ever feels complete. Imagine having a brilliant idea but being unable to start because the thought of making a mistake is unbearable. Or worse, finishing a piece and then destroying it because one minor detail feels wrong. This isn't about being meticulous. This is about being held hostage by your own mind. Compulsions hidden in creation. Compulsions in artists with OCD don't always appear as overt or extreme behaviors. Often, they hide in subtle, repetitive rituals, excessive cleaning of brushes, arranging tools in specific sequences, or insisting on following the exact same creative routine day after day. These are not habits of efficiency, but rather acts of psychological control, attempts to create certainty in an otherwise uncertain inner world. Even the smallest deviation, like a tool being slightly out of place, can provoke a surge of panic or intense discomfort. Artistic decisions, such as color choices or design patterns, may be dictated not by aesthetics, but by the mental safety certain combinations provide. This means the art is not just created from inspiration, but filtered through a layer of anxiety and compulsion. Some artists may feel the need to redo a process over and over, not because the result improves, but because the ritual brings momentary relief. This can stretch a 1-hour project into a 10-hour ordeal. The compulsion offers temporary comfort, but it quickly fades and the cycle begins again. The price? Mental fatigue, emotional frustration, and often creative burnout. These rituals are rarely visible to others, yet they dominate the artist's world. What looks like eccentric behavior from the outside is, in reality, a coping mechanism, a delicate balance between creating something beautiful and surviving something unbearable. OCD as a double-edged sword. OCD can be both a curse and an unexpected asset. On one hand, the obsessive focus on detail, structure, and repetition can lead to incredible craftsmanship. Artists with OCD often possess heightened sensitivity to shape, symmetry, emotion, and nuance. Their work may be deeply intricate, emotionally rich, and astonishingly precise. The same mind that obsesses over imperfection can also produce work that is hauntingly beautiful in its execution. But the darker side is the mental and emotional toll. The obsessive need for flawlessness can lead to crippling self-doubt, burnout, and a perpetual inability to finish projects. These artists may struggle to begin new works, haunted by the fear that they will never measure up to their own impossibly high standards. Even success doesn't quiet the storm. A painting may be praised by critics, but the artist sees only the microscopic flaw no one else notices. They are trapped in a relentless war between their passion to create and a paralyzing fear of imperfection. What begins as an act of expression often becomes a personal trial that leaves them mentally and emotionally exhausted. And yet, their compulsion for excellence can lead to innovation, to new forms of artistic language, proof that suffering and genius, while often linked in cruel ways, can coexist in transformative beauty. A world that doesn't understand the broader public often misinterprets OCD as simply being overly tidy or organized. But OCD is a deep and distressing condition, and this misunderstanding is especially harmful to artists. When they take longer to complete a project, they're labeled as procrastinators or perfectionists. When they refuse spontaneous changes, they're dismissed as rigid or uncooperative. What outsiders see as inflexibility is, in truth, a desperate attempt to manage overwhelming anxiety. This lack of understanding pushes many artists into silence. They hide their struggles, isolate themselves from creative communities, and sometimes give up creating altogether, not due to a lack of talent, but because the weight of internal pressure and external judgment becomes unbearable. In educational settings, young artists with OCD may be misdiagnosed or overlooked. In professional environments, they may be penalized for behaviors that are misunderstood as inefficiency. The stigma is not just a social issue, it's a barrier to opportunity, growth, and healing. To break the stigma, we must start by believing the stories of those who live it. Art as refuge and trap for many artists with OCD, their craft is both a sanctuary and a snare. Immersing themselves in the act of creation provides temporary relief, a sense of order in a chaotic mind. Each brushstroke, each lyric, each sculpted curve becomes a moment of peace, a brief escape from mental torment. Yet, paradoxically, that same art can become a trap. The pursuit of perfection, driven by OCD, can turn the creative process into an endless loop of dissatisfaction and self-criticism. Artists may become obsessed with one minor detail for days, consumed by the idea that the entire piece hinges on it. What once brought joy starts to evoke dread. They may come to hate their own work, not because it lacks quality, but because it fails to meet an internal standard that can never be satisfied. And still, they return to the canvas, not because they are free, but because they are driven. Because in their hands lies not just expression, but survival. Untold stories of silent battles behind many acclaimed pieces of art lie stories of silent, often invisible, battles. Leonardo DiCaprio, for example, has openly shared his experience with OCD, confessing that he used to touch door handles or walk back and forth repeatedly before finding peace. In visual arts, there are painters who refuse to sell their artwork, convinced that no painting is ever done, even if critics and collectors beg to differ. There are musicians who loop a single note for weeks, trapped in the obsessive quest for sonic perfection. And then there are countless unnamed artists, those who never show their work, who create endlessly but share nothing, fearing judgment or exposure. These artists are not weak. On the contrary, they are deeply resilient. Because to create while battling your own mind each day is not just a form of expression, it is an act of extraordinary courage. Each piece they complete is a victory. Each brushstroke, each decision, each moment of silence overcome, it all adds up to a powerful testament of willpower. Their stories remind us that creativity isn't always a gift, it can also be a battleground. How we can support empathy and understanding are powerful tools. To support artists with OCD, we must start by listening. Without judgment or assumptions. Respect their process, even if it's slower, less linear, or more structured than we're used to. Celebrate the effort behind the art, not just the final result. Avoid minimizing OCD with casual jokes or stereotypes. This disorder is neither quirky nor trendy. It's real, painful, and complex. Mental health education within creative communities is essential. By fostering awareness and inclusion, we create safer spaces where artists can thrive without shame or fear. Offer kindness, patience, and recognition. Because for artists with OCD, even starting a new piece can require immense emotional strength. Let's ensure their courage is met with compassion, not criticism. We must be willing to look beyond what is produced and honor the soul that produced it. The next time you gaze at a painting, listen to a melody, or read a poignant line of poetry, pause for a moment. Behind the beauty you see may lie a storm that you cannot. Artists with OCD are not merely creators. They are survivors. They show us that it's possible to craft beauty from chaos, to turn inner turmoil into shared wonder. Let us not only admire their work but honor their journey. For behind every masterpiece may be a mind that fought valiantly to bring it into the world. And in recognizing their struggle, we also learn to celebrate something deeper than art. We celebrate humanity. Every artist with OCD is a mirror, a reflection of the battles we cannot see, and the resilience we too often overlook. Disclaimer: this video is intended to raise awareness and empathy for artists living with OCD. Every person's experience with OCD is unique. If you believe you may be experiencing symptoms of OCD, please consider reaching out to a qualified mental health professional.